The venomous snake that you're most likely to encounter, at least here in the southeastern United States, and in fact the one that's responsible for more snake bites than any other, is this one right here. This beautiful copperhead. This is a southern copperhead. And copperheads are responsible for tons and tons of snake bites because they like to live in places like this. Gardens, suburban areas, even urban centers. As a matter of fact, in North Carolina, more people got bitten in Wake County, one of the most densely populated counties in North Carolina, than any other county last year. And a lot of those bites happened right in backyards. Now, the southern copperhead, typical of copperheads, it's a pit viper. It's related to rattlesnakes, and it has all of those special adaptations that rattlesnakes have. It has heat-seeking pits, and so as I'm sitting here, he's looking at me, he's flicking his tongue, he's using the Jacobson organ to size me up and determine if I'm a predator or if I'm a prey item. And this beautiful snake is responsible for a lot of bites, and the reason for that has to do with how common they are. They're everywhere, but also a little bit about their biology. You see, this species doesn't have any warning system. It doesn't have a rattle on the tail. It doesn't have that bright white mouth that we're used to seeing as a threat display on the cottonmouth. Instead, it's really cryptically colored, so it blends into the leaf litter. It blends in to the background of the habitat that it prefers: woodlands, leaf litter, and gardens, flower beds like this hosta bed. And the reason people get bit by this snake is because you're most likely to come into contact with it, and its first defense, rather than rattling or putting out a threat display, is to lash out. Now, in reality, copperheads aren't that dangerous, especially when we're comparing them to something like a Mojave rattlesnake. But copperheads themselves can be problematic. If you ever get bit by a copperhead, the first thing you want to do is seek medical attention. Don't do anything else. That's always thing one, is seek medical attention. Well, why do so many people get bit by copperheads? Well, perhaps the biggest reason is because they're so cryptic. They can hide in this habitat really undetected. And because they might be coiled up right underneath the hosta plant, you might come in here to weed the hosta plant and pick up a copperhead instead of a hosta plant. And he has all of those heat sensing adaptations that a rattlesnake has, so he can feel the warmth of your hand. They also, because they don't have a warning system, they don't have rattles, they don't have the white in their mouth, their first defense is really to strike out. And that lashing out is actually, we know, a defensive mechanism through some studies that have been done through the University of Georgia, because they don't actually put as much effort into injecting venom when they're biting out at a potential predator. They're really lashing out to just say, hey, leave me alone. So bites from a copperhead usually don't have a full venom load capacity in it, and the venom itself is not nearly as potent as that we'd find on any other venomous species we have here. So usually considered a problem, but something that you're going to survive, and something that may result in some tissue damage, but not much else. Copperheads really should be respected. And you know, even though they are so common, and I know that if you live in the southeastern United States, they are in your neighborhood, I don't want you to be terrified to garden or terrified to go on a walk in the woods just because there's copperheads around. Well, so how do we protect ourselves? How do we live with them? Well, there's a couple things we can keep in mind. Thing one, be cognizant of where you're putting your hands and your feet. We need to know what a copperhead looks like, and when you're weeding around a plant like this, I want you to make sure that you look before you leap. Make sure there's not a snake coiled up where you're pulling weeds. Simply look and don't get complacent. Make sure you know what's around when you step, when you reach, when you grab, because you know what? Just like a rattlesnake, he can see the heat signature of your hand. Wear protective clothing. If you're going to be out working in the yard, if you're going to be away from tightly mown areas where you can see everything that's around, it's a great idea to A, wear long pants. Make sure that you have a good set of shoes on, something that has closed toes. According to hospitals that keep records, the #1 way that people get bit by copperheads is actually walking around with sandals or barefoot, especially at night. We've all done it. You take your dog out at night, you don't want to put shoes on, you just stick on your sandals, or you just go out barefoot, walk around the yard. There might be a copperhead laying there. You step on that copperhead, of course he's gonna bite. You would bite too if somebody stepped square on your back. Of course he's gonna bite. So making sure you take a flashlight and wear shoes, closed-toed shoes. And wear gloves. When you're gardening, watch where you're putting your hands, look before you leap, and wear gloves. It'll protect you and it'll protect the snake. Believe it or not, even though these snakes can be a problem, I love them. I'm glad we have them here at the garden, and we're not eradicating them here. We couldn't eradicate them. The population is far too strong for us to do any kind of control measures here. So when we find one in a place like this, we'll generally move it. If you find one at home, leave it alone. Remember, the #1 reason people get bit by snakes is because they haven't left it alone. Going up to that snake to cut its head off, he may lash out at you, and you may pay the price for really trying to do something about that snake. So, rule of thumb, leave it alone. If you happen to get bit, seek medical attention. Do nothing else. Anything you do to try and treat that snake bite is probably just gonna aggravate the problem. And remember, copperheads, typically not a life-threatening bite, and just a beautiful animal.